Jerusalem, 1961. The world watches a bulletproof glass booth installed in the center of a courtroom. Inside, a man adjusts his glasses and clears his throat with technical precision. He has the appearance of a meticulous accountant or a librarian focused on meeting deadlines. His name is Adolf Eichmann. He was the logistical architect responsible for the coordinated transport of millions of people to extermination centers. The expectation of the audience and international observers was to find a demon, someone who exuded visceral hatred and evident sadism. However, instead of roars or manifestations of fanaticism, what emerges from the booth is a flat, monochromatic, and bureaucratic voice. Eichmann does not use inflammatory ideological terms. He refers to railway timetables. He does not mention human beings or suffering. He speaks of cargo units. His central insistence, maintained until the end of the trial, was that he was merely an efficient employee fulfilling his duty within a legal hierarchy. While covering the trial for the New Yorker magazine, the philosopher Hannah Arendt described the phenomenon as the banality of evil. The perception was disturbing. Eichmann was not an extraordinary psychopath, but someone frighteningly ordinary who surrendered the capacity to think for himself, to operate as a cog. If evil were the exclusive domain of born monsters with biological defects, society would be safe. It would suffice to identify and isolate the anomalies. But if horror can be administered by an educated bureaucrat who follows rules and prizes efficiency, the line separating the ordinary citizen from the executioner is not defined by intrinsic character, but by circumstances and systems. This video investigates the psychological mechanisms and social structures that transform stable individuals into accomplices of mass destruction machines. In 1961, at Yale University, psychologist Stanley Milgram began a series of experiments to measure the limits of human obedience. The motivation was to understand if the just following orders argument used in Nuremberg was a specific cultural justification or universal trait of human psychology. In the experiment, volunteers were instructed to administer electric shocks to a stranger who was actually an actor whenever he missed a memory question. The control panel simulated a voltage ranging from 15 to 450 volts. The last switch bore a clear warning label, XX lethal shock. As the voltage rose, the actor simulated screams about serious heart problems, agonized, and eventually ceased any response, simulating unconsciousness or death. Faced with the volunteer's natural hesitation to continue, the researcher, dressed in a white lab coat symbolizing scientific authority, used standardized, cold commands. The experiment requires that you continue, or you have no other choice. You must go on. The result confronted the predictions of psychiatrists at the time, who believed only 1% of the population would reach the end. In reality, 65% of participants administered the maximum shock of 450 volts. There were no traces of prior sadism in these individuals. The phenomenon identified was the agentic state, the mental transition from an autonomous person who feels responsible for their acts to an agent of authority. In this state, moral responsibility is transferred to whoever holds power. When the individual perceives themselves only as the instrument of a superior system, the personal moral compass is silenced in favor of technical obedience. 10 years after Milgram's studies, psychologist Philip Zimbardo demonstrated how social roles in institutional context can supplant individual morality. In the basement of Stanford University, healthy students with no history of violence were randomly divided into guards and prisoners in a prison simulation. The experiment, planned to last 2 weeks, was interrupted on the 6th day due to the disintegration of sanity and ethics. Upon receiving khaki uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses that concealed their gaze, the individuals designated as guards began to exercise systematic humiliations and abuses of power. Prisoners were subjected to sleep deprivation, cleaning latrines with their bare hands, and exhaustive physical exercises as a form of gratuitous punishment. What was observed was the power of de-individuation. The uniform and the role of authority erased the students' personal identities. There was no need for direct instruction for cruelty. The environment of impunity and group validation were sufficient for violence to emerge. Morality revealed itself to be a trait dependent on the setting. When the system confers absolute power and removes individual identity, The boundary between civilized behavior and tyranny becomes porous. Historically, mass violence is never a sudden event. It is the result of a gradual process of psychological preparation through language. Dehumanization is the mechanism that allows the brain to ignore the biological instinct, not to harm another human being. The process follows a structural pattern. The other is removed from the category of fellow human and inserted into the category of threat or parasite. In Rwanda, local radio referred to the rival group as cockroaches. In the Holocaust, state propaganda described victims as vermin or bacilli, contaminating the nation's purity. In the logic of modern totalitarian regimes, dissidents are frequently labeled as social viruses or traitors to the cause. This semantic alteration serves to shut down cortical empathy. From a neurological standpoint, it is difficult to process the elimination of a father, a child, or a neighbor. However, it is psychologically simple to process the elimination of a pest or an impure element. By transforming the victim into an object or a pathology, the system converts the crime into a public utility service or necessary defense. The executioner does not feel they are taking a life, but performing a task of social sanitation. Hannah Arendt's analysis of Eichmann revealed that the most dangerous form of evil in the modern era is bureaucratic fragmentation. In complex systems, the task of destruction is divided into so many small steps that no single individual feels directly responsible for the final horror. There is a physical and mental separation between decision and execution. The clerk who signs the transport requisitions is focused only on filling out the forms correctly. The administrator who organizes the logistics of the trains focuses on meeting schedules and optimizing costs. The technician who operates the valves merely fulfills a mechanical function of maintenance. When evil is diluted into administrative processes, it ceases to be processed by the mind as an ethical dilemma and starts to be seen as a technical problem. The individual's attention is diverted from the morality of the action to the efficiency of performance. Evil becomes banal because it resembles the daily work of any office. It does not require hatred. It only requires the absence of critical thinking about the final destination of that processed unit. Psychologist Henry Tajfel, through social identity theory, demonstrated that human beings have an innate tendency to favor their group, the in-group, and discriminate against the external group, the out-group, even when the division is based on arbitrary criteria. In moments of economic crisis or social instability, this tendency is amplified. Leaders of extremist movements exploit this vulnerability by creating a narrative of us versus them. The cohesion of the internal group is strengthened through the creation of a common enemy. In this scenario, loyalty to the group becomes the supreme virtue, surpassing individual morality. The individual feels that any act committed in defense of their group is inherently just. The feeling of belonging to a collective cause provides a psychological satisfaction so powerful that it blinds the subject to the cruelty practiced against those outside the group's circle of protection. Evil is perpetrated not by a lack of morals, but by a distorted group morality. The mechanisms of Milgram, Zimbardo, and Tajfel find a new and potent field of operation in the 21st century: the digital environment. Recommendation algorithms function as the new invisible authority, directing the focus of hatred and validating existing prejudices. On social media, dehumanization occurs on an industrial scale. Anonymity and physical distance function like the mirrored glasses of Stanford, removing the emotional impact of face-to-face confrontation. Virtual lynchings, aggressive cancellations, and the destruction of reputations are carried out under an aura of moral superiority. The categorization of ideological opponents as human trash, monsters, or beyond recovery uses the same psychological processes that preceded historical tragedies. The digital system facilitates the removal of empathy by transforming complex human beings into simple avatars or representations of a hated idea. The ease with which one ignores the humanity of the other in online debates is a sign that the mechanisms of the banality of evil remain operative, merely adapted to a new technical infrastructure. Despite the strength of systems, history and scientific experiments also record the existence of dissidents. In Milgram's study, there were those who refused to press the button, even under intense pressure. During the Nazi regime, ordinary citizens risked their lives and those of their families to hide persecuted neighbors, back resistance to systemic evil does not stem from a superior biological constitution, but from maintaining what Arendt called internal dialogue. These individuals refused to merge their identity with that of the group or the authority. They maintained the perception that the final responsibility for their acts is non-transferable. The ability to keep critical thinking active, refusal to accept dehumanizing labels, and the courage to be seen as a bad employee or a traitor to the group in the name of an ethical principle is the only mechanism capable of interrupting the logic of the banality of evil. Resistance begins in the refusal to simplify the world between pure and impure. Are monsters born, or are they made? Deep analysis of history and social psychology indicates that large-scale evil is a construction of social engineering. Horror does not depend on cinematic villains with Machiavellian plans. It feeds on apathy, blind obedience, and the human need to belong to something larger than oneself. Whatever the cost, the potential for destruction is present in any structure that rewards conformity and punishes independent thought. Evil remains banal because it rarely presents itself as a crime. It presents itself as a duty, as a strategic necessity, or as the defense of a greater good. The question that the experiments of Milgram and Zimbardo leave for posterity is not about what those volunteers did, but about what any individual would do today. The line between civility and barbarism is sustained by the individual capacity to question the system and to see the inalienable humanity in those whom the system designates as enemies. The monster is not in the next chair. It is a latent possibility within every social structure that allows the individual to stop thinking,